How are we doing, folks? This is Bob Gums of the Concerned Forum. And it almost seems as a regular deal now. I was getting ready to say that we meet today, we meet together at a very crucial time. It seems that ever since 2016, every Saturday in America is a crucial time. Why is it crucial? Well, what's the biggest thing on the docket right now? Well, the biggest thing is the fact that our nation is at war. Now, we don't like to say that here in America, but the facts are the facts. We have contributed billions and still going, but billions in weapons, humanitarian aid, food, the whole works. And I'm going to tell you, and I know some of you out there might disagree with me, but what Biden is doing with the Ukraine is a good thing. And I know that many of us are worried about getting into a full fledged war. Well, as I said in the beginning, we are at war, whether we wish to acknowledge that fact or not. And that's not our fault, okay? But we have to be real and recognize just what's going on. You have two forces in the world today. One is the force of dictatorship, tyranny, one man rule. The individual does not count. And on the other side, you have democracy, the right of people to elect and determine their own destiny. And they have a say so in how that works. And unfortunately, for the Russian people and other peoples in the world, you have a situation where you have this guy, Putin, who thinks that he can bring the band back together. That's really what he's all about. He wants to put the band back together. Only, unfortunately, we're not talking about the Beatles. Wish we were. But we're talking about the old style Soviet Union. For some reason, him and I want to be careful here, but Putin and the Orthodox Russian Church feel that mankind is better when you have dictatorial rule. And I don't think that the free nations of the world ultimately will, will stand still for that. And that is the problem. Now, I know you hear some people talking about, oh, well, Putin is just defending himself. No, he's not defending himself. The Ukrainian people made up their mind quite some time ago that they didn't want to have anything to do, especially economically, with the old style Soviet Union. And when they saw a chance to break free from that nonsense, to break free from uh, communist rule, they took it. Now I know that you have some people in the eastern part of the Ukraine. They feel obliged to support Putin, but the mass majority of the Ukraine people, they want to be Western. And it's kind of strange, ironic that Putin claims to be the savior of Western civilization, but he's a damn dictator. And unfortunately, again, he has a whole political party here in the United States that agree with him. See, we have here in America, we have a segment of people who claim to be patriotic. I mean, they'll go up on the rooftop and they will shout and yell, "Look at me, I'm so patriotic." Um, Black people and Hispanic people are not patriotic. They don't believe in America. Remember when Barack Obama was running for president, and even after he was elected, what was one of the main chants against Obama? Oh, well, he just doesn't understand America. He doesn't get us. You know, all this crap, which basically was a thing that you had the first, well, I'm saying this, the first, obviously, black person sitting in the White House. And you may not believe this or not, but there's a large segment of Americans that are still hurt by that. They're still hurt over the fact that we had a black man as president sitting in the White House. And what made it even more, how should I say, for them, more of a feeling of being stuck in the back is the fact that he married a black woman. Now, frankly, you can marry who the hell you want to marry. Okay, we're all human beings, but in terms of what photogenics or publicity or propaganda, that really upset a lot of people in certain parts of this country. The idea that you actually had a black man sleeping with a black woman in the White House bedroom, I mean, you had people that were literally banging their heads against stone walls because they were so angered by that. They felt that somehow somebody was trespassing upon their sacred beliefs. And this is what we're dealing with here. When we talk about Putin, remember, you have a Republican Party. We have two major parties in this country, Democrat and Republican. And the Republican, basically, they are in love with a guy overseas that doesn't believe in democracy or constitutional government. They are more happy with the idea of maybe a Putin would be in control rather than a democratic politician, which is crazy. And you have many Republicans I don't want to call them old school, but you have Republicans from the Bush era, both Bushes, uh, Nixon, Eisenhower, as far back as that think that the present Republican Party belongs in a nut house. And quite frankly, I agree with them. Because you're telling me that you would rather have a Putin, old Vladimir Putin, KGB colonel, right? You know the KGB, well, equivalent to our CIA slash FBI. That's what old Vladimir Putin, that was his shtick before he got heavily into politics. And they're telling us that well, we will be better off with Putin than Biden, uh, his present vice president, uh, Pelosi, any Democrat. In other words, any American who doesn't happen to be a right wing Republican. And that's scary. You look at what the Republican Party is trying to do with the way that we vote in this country. And you can see it for yourself. You know, voter subjugation, right? Trying to tell people, well, if you don't have a history of voting for us, then you are an enemy. And as far as Black Americans are concerned, we don't. There's no need to try because the majority of these Republicans have made it loud and clear they don't feel black folks are American enough. Why? Because we vote, generally speaking, we vote Democratic. And remember now, this is the Republican Party. They have no policies, right? They haven't even bothered putting out any position papers on any subject. And my God, there's so many things in this country that need to be dealt with. But they have not. They don't feel it's necessary for them to put out a position paper. They basically tell white Americans, look, trust us. Don't worry about it. Okay? Don't worry about our policies. Just vote for us. And I wonder, what the hell kind of nonsense is that? And the only thing I can say in terms of Democrats, my party, for the sake of transparency, I'll let you know I am a rock rib Democrat, but I was raised in the Republican family. Not this type of Republican, but halfway sane Republicans. But see, that party is gone. They allowed a bum and a thief, and as far as I'm concerned, a traitor to America and what she stands for. They allowed that to take over their party. And I tell you, quite frankly, people do what they want to do. However, if I was a member of the Lincoln family, if I was one of his descendants, I would be suing the Republican Party left and right. Because there is no way in hell that those bozos deserve the right to call themselves the party of Lincoln. Okay? That, my friends, is the major problem that we have here in America today. That is our biggest problem, the Republican Party. Now, someone might ask, well, my God, we have the race issue. We still have, unfortunately, the issue of fairness towards women, both in the home and in the workplace, healthcare, America, when it comes in comparison to the rest of the civilized world, excuse me, when it comes to comparison with the rest of the Western world, our healthcare sucks. You know, just like they say on the block, it sucks. And there's no nice, polite way to put that. We have terrible healthcare in comparison to the rest of the Western world. Our military expenditures. Now, it would be hard right now to talk about our huge or bloated military defense budget. We have a war going on. It's not a good time to talk about cutting back our defense budget when we're in the middle of the beginning part of World War III. And I understand that. Still, it's something that needs to be debated, needs to be talked about. So you might ask, well, why is this guy talking about the Republican Party? The reason is because the Republican Party and the people who stand up as their spokespersons, they have proven themselves to be an exponential threat to the safety and well-being of the constitutional government of the United States of America. Oh, and I didn't even touch upon the environment, because besides the Republican Party, our environmental crisis is our biggest problem. I would say that is number one, because you can't do a damn thing if you don't have a planet upon which you can do anything. See? So I realize that what I say is I've really taken a big chunk, but I think I'm justified, in my opinion, by the way the Republican Party has conducted itself over the last 30 years, and it has just gotten worse and worse. As a matter of fact, Ronald Reagan, he would have a damn hard time. As a matter of fact, I don't think that he would be able to do it at all. I don't think he could be a spokesperson for today's Republican Party. There's no way in hell. Because, by the way, who is the president that allowed the most amount of immigrants into this country? Ronald Reagan. Yes, Ronald Reagan. And I don't think that Ronald Reagan, despite him listening to coon jokes, as they used to call them, right, back in the day, still, I don't think that he would, especially publicly, support any Republican office holder or any Republican who wants to hold office. And if these guys went to, various meetings where speakers from the American Nazi Party or the Ku Klux Klan or some of these other hate organizations, if Reagan knew that, for example, the governor of Florida, this guy had appeared at a number of what can be fairly deemed as anti-Semitic and racist organizations, Ronald Reagan would not have countenanced that. As a matter of fact, I can remember Reagan in some of his speeches attacking the Ku Klux Klan. Now, don't get it twisted, okay? I think that Reagan's ideas on race, in many respects, were seriously backwards, okay? But generally speaking, Reagan, at least, he was an American, okay? these Republicans nowadays, they're not what you would call American. These guys are they're like this European uh, right wing movement. Blood and soil. Do you know that you have these guys? Some of these guys in Congress, they want to end interracial marriage. This idiot that was questioned. Oh yeah, the sister that she has just gotten appointed by President Bush for the Supreme Court, and she is being grilled by these Republican senators. Now they know the girl's going to get it anyway. Thank God, because the Republicans, this time around are not in the majority. Yet they feel obliged to hound and harass this young lady on questions that she has absolutely nothing to do with. And to me, see, that's how the Republicans have made an excellent case for themselves in terms of being racist. Because if you act like a monkey, people are going to assume that you are an ape. And that is what has happened with the Republican Party. The incident that I'm referring to is during the hearing. Oh, where is this guy from? Indiana. A senator from Indiana. He raises the question to the effect, oh, well, something to the effect of if people in a given state want to end interracial marriage, shouldn't they have the right to do so? Now, I'll be quite frank about it. I don't think that the guy that raised this question, I don't think that they were trying to end racial intermarriage right then and there. But they were trying to make themselves look like the champion of racist. I mean, what other reason could you have for even asking a question like that? And see, let's don't get it twisted. The thing about the whole racial intermarriage thing, number one, it's a bad joke. Okay, why do I call it a bad joke? Well, because all you have to do is look in any room full of black Americans, and you will find that racial intermarriage, or not even really marriage, but sex between the races in this country, have been going on for almost 500 years. That's why you have light skinned black and you have dark skinned blacks, both of whom are God's children. And there is no intellectual difference between people who are lighter skinned and people who are darker skinned. Okay, this has been, this is a simple fact of science. All right? But remember, most of the time that came about because of rape. Because as a slave, females have very little say in who they were going to share their bed with. But hey, that's the way it was. And unfortunately, uh, the whole raping thing of black women by white men is something that perpetuates in some parts of this country, even up to today. But for someone to try and make an issue about does the state have a right to discuss interracial marriages, it's stupid. All right? It is really stupid. And it just goes, it shows people where your head and where your heart is at. It shows that your head, where your brains are located, is in the garbage, and that you don't have a heart. And why should this be a big issue to anyone, black or white? Well, the reason is because when you had laws like the the German Nazis did prior to World War II, you are declaring a group of human beings as unfit to be full or to be recognized as fully human. And that is, I mean, what, disgusting, immoral? Yeah, it's all of that. And it's also damn dangerous because when you bring that up, when you bring that subject up in conversation or at a hearing of who should be or shouldn't be on the Supreme Court, all you're trying to do is basically you're asking for trouble. You are trying to basically take a blazing torch and put it in a barrel of gunpowder. You are trying to start something, in other words. And I don't think that that is a proper way for supposedly the greatest democratic body in the world to handle its business. Listen, all human beings have a right to marry who they choose, to sleep who they choose. I mean, to sleep with who they choose. End of story. It's like a non issue, and it should be a non issue. And see, that is the problem with the Republican Party. Because things that were considered, that we've always considered to be a product of our democracy, the Republican Party of today wants to basically open up a very old, rotten can of worms and try to, how should I say, basically get their constituents to say, hey, these Republicans are great because they hate the same people that I hate. Because a question like that in the 21st century really doesn't have any business being asked. It's not any of your business who marries who, as long as it's not being done under duress. Now, I could see the state getting involved in marriage if the marriage, for some reason, has been shown to be, in some parts of the world, or I should say, people from some parts of the world come to Britain or the United States as immigrants, and they want to carry some of their traditions with them. Like, yeah, well, I contracted my daughter to his son when she was 5 years old, and I want that contract to be kept. That's a time when the court should step in because you're forcing a woman to marry under duress, and that's illegal, right? But the idea that if I see a woman who happens to be white and we seem to get along and what have you, and we want to see about maybe having getting married and maybe even starting a family, or whether it was just dating, that's no one's damn business. See, um, this is the problem with the Republican Party. They no longer believe in the inalienable rights of man. They don't believe that we don't have the right. People, no one has the right to basically say, well, you can have this right, but you can't have that right. And the Republican Party, for some odd reason, they don't understand the difference between right and wrong. They don't seem to understand that there are certain things that the state has no business in. And see, I think that that's why um, a, a lot of these Republicans they looked around one day and said, "Hey, ideologically, we are a hell of a lot more closer to Putin and the communists and the dictatorship. We're much more closer to them guys than we are to Abe Lincoln or FDR or Eisenhower. We are more red, really red, than blue." And that's why you see all, these Republican senators, and of course Trump, bragging on how great Putin is. Unfortunately, we now see that Putin talks a better game than he is able uh, to wage war because he has done a piss poor job, and the way that he has waged war against the Ukrainians, Russia's never going to live that down. I don't know what anybody else out there is thinking, but the world's not going to forget that, and they're not going to forget the horror that Putin and Russia have waged upon the Ukrainians. Uh, their army seems to be very, very handy, very good when it comes to bombing babies in hospitals. But in terms of anything else, they don't seem so good. And see, this is the problem here in America in a nutshell. Oh, and by the way, if you don't think that one of the reasons that Trump was able to go into the White House for 4 years with the help of Vladimir Putin, then you've been spending your last 20 years sleeping under a rock or something. Yeah, Putin and Russia did a whole hell of a lot to get Trump elected. See, that's one of the things that tyrants do. They look up the system that they want to overthrow. They will look upon that system, right, and they will try to evaluate all the weaknesses All right, we have a weakness here in America. It's called the Electoral College. It stands almost as a wall between the people and their right to pick their own leaders. You know, when you hear them talk about the Electoral College, see that needs to be done away with. And there's no big, oh, he wants to destroy the Constitution. No, 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 no. It's called amending the Constitution, number one. And it's been done before, right? Remember, when we started off in this country, women could not vote, with a few exceptions of maybe 3 or 4 places that women were allowed to vote. Um, Massachusetts, or certain counties in Massachusetts. But yeah, it was, women generally were not allowed to vote in this country. I think the first time was around 1888, and that was only in maybe one or two states out west. Well, women, generally speaking, were not allowed to vote, and that was changed. The Constitution was amended, and women were able to vote as of 1919. And now we need to look upon this electoral college, and we need to get rid of it. I don't need an elector to mess with my vote. I will vote for whom I want to vote. The electoral college is an unnecessary relic of the past. It ranks right along with slavery. Oh, and that was something else. Another example of the Constitution being amended. And see, that's something else that we have to understand. The Constitution is not a dead document. In other words, you write it down somewhere in 1789 and it stayed like that. No, 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 no. I just picked out a couple of things that were amended. Why not the Electoral College? Because, as I say, the Constitution is not a dead document. That's the thing with people like Clarence Thomas, No, the Constitution is not dead. The Constitution has to keep up with history, just like everything else. You don't drive the same car that your great grandfather drove, do you? Of course not, because as time goes on, improvements are made, things get better. Just that simple. We have come to a point where we realize that the idea of an electoral college is anathema to democratic government. Now, of course, Republicans will raise all kinds of hell, but maybe they should, because they know the majority of the American people do not care for the Republican Party, which is one of the reasons, going back to that other thing, about how come there is no platform for the Republican Party. One of the reasons is because of the fact that anything that they put out, they know the mass majority of the American people will say, hell no. Walk into any restaurant or breakfast cafe and just call it out loud. Hey, how many of you people want to end Obamacare? That's not the proper name for it, but what the hell? we're talking to folks just like ourselves. And that's for regular working stiffs, it's Obamacare. So just walk into the diner and hey, how many of you guys want to, guys and gals, how many of y'all want to end Obamacare? Give me a show of hands. You might see some broken hand. The guy that asked the question might wind up with a broken arm or so, but quite frankly, the majority of the folks there will tell you to go take a flying jump. But that is why the Republicans, that's one of the reasons why they try to hide what they do. Listen, anytime you're dealing with somebody and they want to hide where they're coming from, well, you can bet that they're up to no damn good. And it is time for the American people, it's time for us to grow up as a nation. It's time for us to grow up. And I know that that's hard for some people to take, but that's just, it's a fact of life. It's just like, and I am so surprised, I guess, to see Bill Maher get on this anti-woke kick. Now, let's remember, woke just means wake up, okay? You better get woke and do your chores. That's all woke means. But that's what the Republicans like to do. They like to take the English language and bend it all out of shape. And then the poor working class stiff out there, right? Oh, well, the Republicans are trying to say that this is when people who say woke are not on my side. They want everything. They want my tax dollars to go to freeloaders, right? They want to abolish the police force and all. Hey, listen, I'm not quite sure who came up with that one about abolish the police, all right? But whoever did that, when they came up with that idea, or with that saying, abolish the police, it was like feeding a nice snack to every bigot in the country. And you have to realize that. And then, of course, you have the Democrats acting like, little cowards, but, oh, no. We would never, never abolish the police department. Well, you're right. Should never do that. But there are better ways to express as an elected official especially, there are better ways to express your anger and disappointment with law enforcement across the country. The idea that you say abolish the police is dumb. And it doesn't help anyone except the people who hate people of color anyway, because they see this as an opportunity to tear down the call for justice in law enforcement. See, that's what it's all about. As an individual, how do I feel about abolish the police? I think that it's a very wrong idea. Because if you're going to go that route, well, hell, let's get rid of automobiles. Yeah, let's abolish cars. I've lost some friends in car accidents. unable, some have gotten killed, some folks have gotten killed, some folks have become crippled or disfigured because of car accidents. So therefore, let's just get rid of cars. And if you think that that sounds silly, then I'm glad. Because it is silly. It's a silly idea. When something doesn't work the way that it's supposed to work, you don't throw it away, right? Should we throw away cars? As I said, should we throw away cars? Because they have a tendency to get into accidents, right? Doesn't make any sense. But what you do, as Ralph Nader showed, you can do things to make that car safer, right? You can make sure that the people who get behind the wheel of that car are qualified to be behind the wheel of the car. You make sure that the internal parts of the car are made in a safe manner, right? Seat belts, for example. You have no idea how many people got killed, got hurt, because there was a time in this country where you didn't. How many of you all out there remember getting in the car and not worrying about putting on your seatbelts? Well, that used to be that was a regular thing here in the United States. See, that's why it's good to make sure you got a few old schoolers in any venture that you start. You need to have a couple of old schoolers around to remind people of things that could happen and what life was like before certain things happened. Because I can remember as a kid, very young kid, and I can remember when cars was kind of a death trap, especially if you were riding around with somebody that was not what we would call now a safe driver. But we didn't get rid of cars. We didn't abandon cars. We made them safer. We made them smarter. And that essentially did the job. Was it perfect? Did it become perfect? Well, nothing made in the hands of man is going to be perfect, because man himself is not perfect. But you get the basic idea. You don't, tear down something because it has some issues. Now, yeah, for the longest we've had a problem with law enforcement. However, that doesn't mean that we have to get rid of the concept of law enforcement. That's nuts. Because that's to say that the only people that commit crimes are white people. And that's not true. You have criminals in white, black, red, yellow. Every group has a problem with criminality. But that is the nature of man. You're going to have some bad people. And basically that's what law enforcement is there for. So what do? You work to make sure that law enforcement is an organization whose purpose is to protect the public from people who commit crimes. Period. And you take away this emphasis on using law enforcement to basically harass and hound black American men. And yeah, you're going to have some black American men that do need to be locked up. And we have to recognize that. But the community does not need is to be treated like they're all criminals. That's the first part of it. Second part of it is that we do spend too much on pure, how should I put this? On pure crime, right? In other words, and now I'm going to sound like typical liberal bleeding heart, okay? But I'm right. You work on managing your society in a more sane and civilized manner, right? And that also will contribute to bringing down the crime wave, or what you might call the crime wave. And I have my doubts about that because crime had gotten really low before this COVID thing blew up in our face, right? And also, we have to understand that there are reasons for everything, whether we like them or not. And that, yeah, it makes more sense to build a school than to build a jail. Because if you spent more time building schools and other like places and institutions, you wouldn't have the need for so many damn jails. Now, right wingers, they don't want to hear that. They don't like to hear that. Okay, it's called facts. Okay, that's the reason why, by the way, people who get involved in science, for example, have a tendency, usually, to vote liberal. Now, you would figure that people who are basically into science, that the majority of them, right, would vote conservative, okay, would be politically conservative. But no, that's not the case. And the reason is because people who are involved in science, they deal in facts. They deal in what is, right? So people who are really like right wing, usually you don't find a lot of them who are scientists, okay? Because right wing people, they basically want to act as their belief system inclines them to act. You know that all of God's creatures are basically, or generally, created equal. I mean, science teaches you that, right? And that if there's something wrong, well, then there's a reason why something might be wrong. It's not necessarily because they are, quote, bad people, see? But unfortunately, a lot of people with that right wing mindset, the facts don't make any difference, right? The facts don't make any difference. That's why you don't, how should I put this? You don't find that many religious fundamentalist type people into science, usually. Because they don't trust science, because they don't like facts. They feel that they get their answers in life through a belief system, not through facts. And again, I dare say that's another one of the big problems that we have in this country. And I'll give you an example. Senator Graham, he did something that it surprised the hell out of me. And I feel very bad about Senator Graham because, number one, he wore the uniform. I mean, no big deal. He was, I believe he was either Air Force. He was a lawyer in the Air Force. Okay, I can respect that. I wore the uniform, so I respect any man or woman that also wore the uniform. And he was the one Republican. I've seen him actually stand up against racism once upon a time. But then it seemed that once his main buddy, um, McCain, right, uh, Captain McCain, once he passed away, or what is he called, Big John? But once Big John passed away, it seemed like, I don't know, something really happened to Graham. And his reputation for honesty, decency, compassion, all that went out the window. And he just got deeper and deeper uh, in the hole that Donald Trump was digging for Graham and the rest of his party. I mean, remember, before Trump got the Republican nomination, right? Graham used to tear the hell. Oh, excuse me. It's almost that time, folks. But I just want to say quickly before Trump got that nomination, Graham would light up Trump, calling him a bigot, a nut, the whole negative book. But then it seems that, I don't know, something happened. And Senator Graham became almost like a fawning little puppy dog for Donald Trump. And I'll never understand it. Because Graham was he was one Republican I had a hell of a lot of respect for. Just like me and my dad. Well, not, I won't say that. But yeah, my dad was like I said, a big Republican in Harlem, district leader in the whole bit. But I was a rock ribbed Democrat. But I always respected my father and the Republicans that he associated with because they were decent men and women. And that's almost the way that I looked upon Senator Graham. But now he'll always be a very big, very sad mystery to me. I'll never figure that out, why he did what he did to himself. But that's the problem that we have in this country. We have people in one party that basically they do not believe in the constitutional democratic ideals of American government. And they're dangerous, especially when their hero happens to be a guy named Putin. And that, my friends, it's very dangerous. You take a look at what their hero, Putin, is doing to those innocent people in the Ukraine, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Listen, great talking with you today, and God willing, we'll be back next week, same time, same place, same channel. You take care of yourself, take care of each other. God bless. And this is Bob Gommons with the Concern Forum, signing off.